All right, welcome back to Building an Inclusive Classroom. This is Relationship Tune-Ups Part 2. I am Carrie Cormier,
And I'm Jahari Sykes-Ratliff.
and we would like to welcome you again to the LRC. And so today's professional development is brought to you by the LRC-South at Rowan University's College of Education. And the LRC-South is an NJDOE project that promotes the practices of inclusive education through the provision of resources, services, and professional learning opportunities. Some of the services and professional development we provide are listed here. We also have family and community outreach. Please know that membership is free and you can access it either through the link in the slides here or through the QR code. Our agenda for today's session is to revisit defining social emotional learning, review some tips and strategies to incorporate social emotional learning in the classroom, discuss empathy maps, and responding to trauma. Some of the norms of the LRC-South's professional learning series are that we value everyone's thoughts and opinions. We treat one another with respect. We believe that there are no stupid questions. We believe in sharing the air, letting everyone have a chance to contribute. We recognize that it is okay to make mistakes, and we give and get grace. The goals and objectives of this video is to understand how to strengthen relationships through exploring social emotional learning and trauma-informed practices. As a result of this video, viewers will be able to define and identify examples of social emotional learning and trauma-informed practice.
Social emotional learning defined. So social emotional learning is not only when an individual acquires knowledge and skills to develop a healthy identity, but when they apply that knowledge. And so one question that we really want you to focus on throughout the remainder of this session is, how have you been teaching and fostering social emotional learning in your classroom? This might be a nice conversation for you to have with your colleagues as well. Doing so will help you to maybe come up with some new ideas or help you share some ideas with teachers that may need more support around how to teach the knowledge and skills necessary for children to develop these healthy identities.
Or even thinking about if your district does have a program that you're using, how can you take some of the tools and strategies from that particular program that might be a standalone piece and start to incorporate it into some of your daily activities?
Right. So here's some ideas, tips and strategies for incorporating social emotional learning into your classroom. The first one is a student check-in each day. And so if you're one of those people, it's like, I just don't have time for that. It doesn't have to be a whole lot of time allocated for this. It may just be a feelings chart that's at the door. And oftentimes this is something we see in preschool and kindergarten, but I think it would be appropriate in high school as well. Just having your students move a feeling or emotional face or a meme to their name or their picture that indicates how they feel. If I'm putting a sad face up, that means that at some point during the day, you want to connect with the student sooner than later to kind of just be like, what's going on? But you want to make sure that we're acknowledging their feelings, and doing so helps them to develop trust in you and also reinforces the safe space that we're attempting to create in our classrooms. So the student check-in is one great strategy. Another is allowing and encouraging partner and collaborative work, which is something that I think you likely have heard this feedback and evaluations or with your peers and colleagues, or it's just knowledge that you have already, the shoulder partner. That is a really nice piece that helps to also develop positive relationships. So when you're embedding collaborative work into your practices, you're essentially helping to build social emotional learning or include it in your classroom. Nurturing and modeling a culture of kindness. I think we could talk for like an hour about what this looks like. How are you doing this? So I'll leave this here, but I would love to charge you to really look at your classroom and just walk in there, look around. How does it feel? Do you see things that reflect the culture of kindness? Do you hear it when your children are in the classroom? And then you can go from there. Building and using social emotional vocabulary like self-regulation, conflict resolution. How are we going to problem solve this? These are important pieces that we want to make sure are part of the language that children are using. And the best way to teach that is through modeling, including reflective writing opportunities. And so this is not only you like incorporating creative thinking and open-ended opportunities for children to really be more considerate about whatever it is that you've posed, but it also is encouraging them to put on paper their thoughts about said topic and how they feel about whatever it is that you're asking them to write about. But this reflective writing, again, honors their voice. And this lends again into this space that we're creating that's safe and constructing it in a way where they feel secure. Create a calm down corner, which is like my favorite thing ever, for specifically my child, and I'm sure Carrie's as well. But when we're all, even as adults, we get into like the space where things can be so very chaotic and you're overwhelmed and you're like, yeah, I just need to walk away. Do we give children an opportunity to just walk away? And when they walk away, where are they going?
And teaching them how to walk away.
How to walk away, exactly. The breathing techniques, all of this stuff is so very important. But if you have a small corner in your classroom where children can just go sit down and I can practice these techniques, that helps me to center myself. I'm okay. I can work through this. And then they can return. Or if I need to sit down and beyond just breathing, I may need to look at a magazine or something that helps me to just de-escalate or kind of get all my thoughts right. So what's in your corner? What's in your, we say in preschool, cozy corner or your calm down corner? It's not a timeout chair, no timeout chairs, but it's a space where we can go and get recentered and reinvigorated and come back to learning focus for whatever the task is that you have at hand. Allowing time to talk, and that's very important. I think we need to make sure that we're honoring children's voices and perspectives. And the way that we do that is by giving them the space. And so sometimes we have to and listen. Teaching mindfulness, and lastly, encouraging expression through art experiences. And there's tons of research on the impact of just incorporating art in your classroom for children to express themselves versus sometimes talking. A lot can come through art. So this is another component and strategy that you can build into your classroom that's going to make sure that you're hitting on those social emotional learning components. So here are some interventions for working with children who've experienced trauma. We want to make sure that we're forming connections. And so that's a part of building positive relationships. So as you're forming and building positive relationships, we're making connections with the children. And that's really helping to support this trust that they have with you and you with them. Teaching children to recognize and name emotions. I think that as adults, it's nothing, and there's worse things, but I always say it like very loosely. It's nothing worse than an adult that can't name their emotion. They're just angry and they don't know how to problem solve and don't know how to use conflict resolution to like work through it. They're just angry. God, these are skills we teach our students and our children as early as 3, saying, oh, are you frustrated? Are you angry? Are you mad? Are you sad? And not just recognizing and naming the emotions, but like you mentioned earlier, Carrie, how do we now manage that feeling? What is the appropriate response when I'm sad or I'm upset? But recognizing, naming emotions as a child is a skill that we need to teach. So when we become adults, we're competent and able to say, I'm mad right now, but this is how I'm going to work through this.
And knowing how to distinguish emotions, right? Thinking about distinguishing between anger and frustration. And then once you've named the emotion, knowing how to, either de-escalate or shift your mindset of I'm frustrated, like Jahara, you just said, I'm mad right now. Doesn't mean I need to keep being mad. How do I stop being mad? And so learning those skills and embedding them within our own mindsets from a very young age, through the turbulent teen years, right? Middle school, high school, like you need to be able to name how you're feeling because you're going to feel so many things will only help us to be healthier adults. And ultimately, we need to have that perspective of where are our students going with how they're feeling? What are we preparing them for? So I might be preparing them for the immediate, test or quiz or whatever I have in my classroom, but I also need to be preparing them for life.
So next, modeling assertiveness, and this is really just encouraging your students to be open and honest about their views, wishes, and feelings. Giving students choices, being sensitive to environmental cues that may cause a reaction in a traumatized child, checking for assumptions, observing your students, and then asking follow-up questions. Making sure that you're setting clear and firm limits for inappropriate behavior, and then developing logical consequences rather than punitive ones. There needs to be understanding that children cope by reenacting trauma through play or through their interactions with others. So you need to really build in time to have those follow-up conversations after the reenactments. Low and slow. This helps to decrease further triggering. So you want to make sure you're lowering your volume, your pitch of voice. You're using a matter-of-fact tone. You use short sentences, ask very few questions, talk to the student or with them, but not at them. Slow down by slowing your heart rate, take slow, deep breaths, slow rate of speech, and pause between your sentences and slow down your body movements. Self-care is so important to prevent vicarious trauma. The more that you take care of yourself, the more you're available to feel for your students. So you must make you a priority.
So a strategy that can help you think about your students in a holistic way is the creation of empathy maps. So often as teachers, we are focused on their academics, we're focused on, deficits and what they can't do. And so it's great to take a step back, especially now, as you're going through the school year. It's great to do at the beginning of the school year, but also in the middle of the school year as well. Like now that you've gotten to know your students better, is to look at empathy maps.
An empathy map is a simple visual tool that educators can use to connect with their students. Empathy mapping is used for building relationships and to make better instructional decisions based on the needs of our kids. Empathy maps are typically divided into sections with a representation of a student in the center. Each section helps us to learn more about our students. Interesting goals are things that they like sports, music. It's important to know their interesting goals so we can connect something that they love to something in the curriculum. Examples of assets are areas of strength, like fluency in a language. They're a good listener, they're a systems thinker, or they've mastered a specific skill. Academic needs are the areas that our students need to improve in. If I'm an English language arts teacher, the ability to interpret informational text. If I'm a math teacher, unit conversion or proportional reasoning. SEL needs are skill sets that relate to self and also others. These include self-awareness, social awareness, and also responsible decision-making. Career needs are soft skills like communication, creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, skills that we know that our young people need now, but also in the future. Traditional ways of collecting information can be through polls, surveys, and looking at their work. But knowledge of students can also be gleaned in classroom discussions, paying attention to what they care about, recognizing their gifts and abilities, and in things that they voluntarily talk about. Empathy maps can be used to make instructional decisions, such as appropriate scaffolds, differentiation, and themes of projects or lessons. They can also be used to co-design learning experiences around what matters most to students. I have found the empathy mapping process extremely useful for determining where I need to become more socially and culturally competent regarding the students that I serve. Think of the student who needs you the most and start there.
So this is a really great tool, again, from Edutopia, that you can use in your classroom and just do it for one student. Start with one. You do not have to do an empathy map for every single student, but it helps us to understand the student from a strengths-based perspective. So again, as we are looking through fostering connections with students for social emotional learning, but also trauma-informed practices, using a tool like empathy maps to look at the student from a holistic standpoint and really kind of see all of the different components that make them who they are can help us tailor instruction, tailor how we might be using explicit instruction to direct them explicitly about what they might need, be it academics, be it social emotional learning. And so again, it helps us take that wider perspective, take a step back. And as we're talking about relationship tune-ups, this is a great tool as you get to know your students to see, okay, how am I framing the student in my own mind? And what are some areas that I need to grow in more? Again, that social and cultural competency that they discussed in the video. This is a great tool to kind of help you as an educator see, what do I need to work on? So some other resources we have linked here in the slides, and we'll make sure that these are available on the LRC website, is this list for teachers from Attitude Magazine of 13 practices that can help you respond to student trauma. So some highlights that they mention in these 13 practices, and Jahari just kind of went over, is simplifying our language. We love to use lofty language as teachers to kind of help our students in their vocabulary and their comprehension, but just knowing that sometimes simple language, slow sentences, lower pitch of voice and things like that can really kind of help students because of information overload that might be happening in their brains as they're experiencing trauma. So keeping it simple will help them feel like they can manage the information that is coming at them. Also think about mindful minutes. So having a minute every day, having a couple minutes every day, that students can take to just do some deep breathing. In the elementary classroom as they're transitioning between different subjects or coming in from lunch, going out to lunch, in middle school or high school settings, this can be like, as you come into my classroom, like just take a mindful minute. That could be your do now. It's just to have you take a minute to focus on, being present in the current classroom. So mindful minutes are a great piece. Visual aids to help lighten the load put on working memory. Again, we talk about with trauma and social emotional learning, having so much information coming at you and processing all of it. Sometimes we just, there's that idea of the spoon theory, right? I only have so many spoons to give in a day. If you don't know that theory, go look it up. But again, I only have so many spoons to give in a day. And you know what? Maybe I'm just all out of spoons. So give me a visual, give me something to look at that will help me process ideas. Really, it's just helping the brain work at its best capacity. May not be its full capacity, but just working the most efficiently. And again, as we had mentioned, creating cool down kits, calm corners, Zen zones, something for students to be using as a tool to help them de-escalate if they feel themselves being triggered, or if they feel themselves going into fight or flight mode, just something to help them bring them back down to stasis. So some key takeaways from this video is your mental well-being as a teacher has to be intact in order to support a student that has or is experiencing trauma. So taking care of yourself is key. We do not want you to have vicarious trauma based on what your students are experiencing or what else is going on in the world. Making sure that relationships are the foundation of all classroom learning. So really knowing your students and knowing them in multiple capacities, because they are not living in isolation in your classroom. There's a lot going on. So do you know all the different facets that are going on in their life? And making sure, you set the tone in your classroom through modeling collaborative experiences and the climate and culture of your classroom. You are the leaders in your classroom. So really making sure that you are leading by example. So some references for you to look at for further learning are listed here. And then also please be sure to connect with us at the LRC South through our various social media accounts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and on YouTube.